Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, here to talk to you today about the AFC wildcard game with the Titans. And joining us is Mike Miracles for the Know Your Foe episode, otherwise known as Mike Herndon. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good. How about yourself?
Can't complain. Appreciate you doing this. And let's talk a little bit about the Titans. And you're the expert, obviously, on that. And I wanted you to kind of bring us up to date on their season so far. Obviously, the Ravens played the Titans just what it was 6 weeks ago now, 7 weeks ago,
Yeah, week
6 weeks
11,
ago.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So it's not like these teams don't know each other recently, and yet there have been some fairly substantial changes, at least for the Ravens since then, and I think probably for the Titans as well. But before we started getting into that, tell us where people can find your work.
Yeah, so BroadwaySportsMedia.com is the website. It's independently run and owned Nashville sports website. We cover mostly Titans. Yeah, obviously Titans are the big ticket team here, but also some Nashville Predators and Nashville SC, the MLS team here. So we hit all that, but we really pride ourselves on being your one-stop shop for Titans news, analysis, tape breakdown, the whole thing. So we've got a bunch of really talented guys, a bunch of former football coaches that help us break down scheme and kind of give us some insight there. So if you're looking for information on the Titans, I think that's a great place for you to start and check it out. I'm a little biased, but I still think it's a pretty good product there.
No, that's okay. And you're at Mike Miracles on Twitter?
That's right, at Mike Miracles on Twitter if you want to follow along as I try to get some information out here over the next few days about this game and kind of the key matchups that I see forming here.
Highly recommended follow, guys. For a lot of reasons, you ought to start building up a list of people that you trust and follow. And I think the Know Your Foe guests are some of the best to have on. They tend to be highly analytic. They give good content. The more analytic you are, the less biased you are. Typically, I have found, and I really appreciate the perspectives we get from all of you guys when we have these shows, Mike.
Yeah, I actually have tried to follow guys that you've recommended before from your show because I like to get that perspective from other teams around the league. I think it helps when I come to looking at free agency. It comes to looking at opponents coming up that you're not as familiar with. I think that's really good to know, and I enjoy some of the follows that I've gotten off of your feed, so I appreciate that.
All right, Mike, appreciate it. Let's go back and let's talk a little bit about what's happened since. Obviously, one of the big news from the Titans is Henry's ascension during these last few weeks and rise to 2,000 yards.
Yeah, he's really a unique, special guy. It's a lot of fun to watch him. He's been on this track and gaining steam now for I feel like 2.5 years. Right around 2.5 years ago, midway through that 2018 season, the light kind of clicked on for him, right? And if you listen to Titans fans and some of the Titans media, there's a conversation that happened between Derrick Henry and Eddie George around that time. Eddie George is still very connected to the Titans. Derrick Henry had been splitting snaps and really was the backup, not backup, but he was the B end of a 1A, 1B rotation with Dion Lewis at that time, which is hard to believe right now, just 2 years later. But he wasn't getting the opportunities he wanted. He wasn't running with the authority that a guy his size should have been. And he had a conversation with Eddie George that I know Derrick Henry credits as a turning point, and a lot of people do. But since that moment, the light clicked on for him. He was really good at the end of that season. He picked up, obviously, had a great year last year, winning the rushing title. But then this year, even after all the touches in the playoffs, he famously had, crazy playoff numbers. So one of the best rushing performances in NFL history in the playoffs last season. He picked up right where he left off. There's no sign of slowing down. There's no sign of the workload getting to him, taking out his legs. He just ran for 250 yards to close out a 2,000-yard season when he had almost 400 touches. The guy is an absolute machine. Conditioning-wise, he is really great at avoiding bad and awkward hits. He's a guy that protects his legs very well, and that stiff arm that he's kind of famous for is a big part of that. He's able to use that length to keep guys off of his lower body and off of some of those hits that would normally hurt a running back in a crowd and in situations like that. He's been really fun to watch. I think the thing that kind of gets lost with him in the size, the 6'3", the 250, the speed, and being able to pull away from the secondary when he gets free. That's all fun, and that's all the stuff that makes the highlight shows, with the stiff arm thrown in there too. But the stuff that's made him really turn into a special back has been the vision, the footwork, the ability to read out those zone read runs that the Titans love to throw at teams. So he's got that all down. He's able to make his blockers right in front of him. He's one of the only, or he is the only 2,000-yard rusher to ever hit that mark without having a single Pro Bowl offensive lineman in front of him. So it's
Wow,
really
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a unique situation for him.
All right. We have to take a commercial break here. I want to come back and ask you a question about Henry's footwork and the use of choppy steps versus long steps when we get back.
All right, guys, real quick, I want to tell you about MyBookie. As I always do, you know the promo code. It's Ravens. Use the Ravens, and they will match half of your deposit. So you deposit $100, they will give you a free $50. You deposit $500, they'll give you a free $250. All that is money that you can then put on the Ravens or another team and make money back. It's real easy to do. Head on over to MyBookie and check it out. Right now, the Ravens have a 3.5-point favorite. Whether you agree or disagree, either way, it's a great time to put money on it. Any game this weekend, lots of wildcard games, plus you got the college championship game on Monday. It's a great time to hop on over to MyBookie. And when you do, use that code Ravens that I mentioned, so they'll match you halfway there with some free money. Enjoy.
Back with Mike Miracles here. Mike Herndon, otherwise known as, but give him a follow on Twitter at Mike Miracles. Wanted to ask you again about Derrick Henry and the use of choppy steps versus long steps. And he definitely gives you that long stride look and definitely is a good open field, high-end, top speed that you expect from a back. The Ravens going back to a similar kind of season in 2003 from Jamal Lewis, who rushed for 2066, of course, and got shut down by Tennessee more or less in that playoff game. He definitely had the long speed, but he also, what really made him a powerful runner was those short, choppy steps when he was in traffic, that he kept his stride very short and kept his legs churning, ran very hard.
Yeah, and that's something that Henry has had to work towards, right? He is by nature a strider. He's got long legs. When you see him get in the open field, you really see him open that thing up, and he's got those long strides that help him, keep his distance from those defensive backs trying to chase him down. But he's become much better in traffic, and it's something that he's worked closely with Tony Dews, the Titans running backs coach, with. His footwork has gotten way, way better since he's come into the league. There's a famous video, and I'd have to go back to find it, but from training camp, I think it was his rookie year, where he was running a footwork drill, and trying to step over pads, and he could not get through the drill. He kept kicking the pad over, and it was a mess. And you see some of the stuff they do now, and he's very, very. You would not expect his feet to be as good for the size back that he is and kind of the mold that he is, but he's got great feet. The jump cuts and stuff like that are extremely explosive. He's obviously a tremendously strong individual, but he's got some really nimble feet for a guy that plays with that kind of size and physicality.
The Ravens going to have to build a lot of what they do defensively in order to stop Henry. Of course, they played with four defensive linemen last time, and we're missing both Campbell and Brandon Williams. It's well known by Ravens fans just how bad this run defense is whenever Brandon Williams misses a game. So having him back will be, I think, a big deal. Calais Campbell, also obviously a big man in a lot of ways in terms of eating snaps, playing the run well, also providing some pass rush. But both teams have had changes. Tell us what's different about the Titans since their last matchup, whether that would give the Raven fans hope or make them fear more.
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting deal with the Titans defense. They have been bad all year, but the bad has kind of shifted around. I feel like early in the year, the secondary was really the weak spot. They were playing, Jonathan Joseph was one of their starters in the Ravens' first matchup with the Titans. Breon Borders, who was kind of a street free agent kind of guy that was sitting on the practice squad, was their starter opposite Malcolm Butler. And I think they'd only had Desmond King for maybe I can't remember if that was his first game or maybe his second game as a Titan, but he'd only been in Nashville for maybe a couple weeks tops at that point. So those guys, Desmond King settled in a little bit more. They've gotten Adoree Jackson back, which Adoree Jackson certainly showing a little bit of rust over the past 3 weeks. He was out for the first 13 games of the season with a knee injury that kind of it was really kind of a mysterious thing. He tried to come back. I think re-injured it. They won't say one way or another, but it's still something he's dealing with. He's on the injury report. He's not practicing full weeks of practice. I think he'll probably play and probably start, but it remains to be seen how effective he's really going to be. But I still think even a hampered Adoree Jackson is probably a little bit better player than Breon Borders was. But so that's a little bit different. Jayon Brown obviously got injured in that game with the Ravens. He came out and his replacement in that game was actually Will Compton, who a lot of people around Nashville love as a podcast personality. He is Bussin' with the Boys podcast on Barstool Sports with Taylor Lewan is very funny and fun to listen to. But as a linebacker, he's really kind of more of a special teams guy right now. He's not a guy you want playing a ton of snaps. David Long, the guy who is playing in that spot now, was on the COVID list at that time. He's now the full-time linebacker. He's the defensive play caller. He's a second-year guy, 6th-round pick out of West Virginia the year before, but smaller guy at 5'11", about 220 pounds, but extremely physical for that size, very quick, very instinctive. He's very good at shooting gaps, and he plays bigger than his size. You would think, this guy's going to be a lightweight. He will come in and play with some heavy hands and stun offensive linemen in the hole from time to time. He's not as physical as Evans, but he's probably a better linebacker right now than Evans, in my opinion. But so David Long in, Jayon Brown out. It's a coverage liability. Long is athletic, but he's not instinctive in coverage. He's really more instinctive coming forward. It's something that he barely was asked to do in college, so he's still adjusting to that side of the game at the NFL level. So those two are probably the biggest changes. And then on offense, the biggest change really on that side of the ball is Ty Sambrailo, who got hurt in the Ravens game as well for the Titans. Mm-hmm. He got knocked out for the year, so they are down to their third left tackle for the season, which is David Quessenberry, another guy who, practice squad guy, wasn't expected to play at all, is suddenly their starting left tackle and has been for the past, really ever since that Ravens game. So, and he's an interesting guy, 30 years old, has been in the league for, I think, 8 years, but had played only about 50, 60 snaps prior to that Ravens game.
To that Ravens game, yeah. I remember seeing it and thinking this is a big opportunity when he came in, and it didn't turn out so great.
Yeah, I thought he played really well coming off the bench in that game. He had a couple reps against Ngakoue where he was one-on-one and was able to hold his own, which was impressive for a guy who barely played. He's a good athlete. You go back, he's an interesting story. Came into the league as a 5th or 6th round pick out of San Jose State for the Texans. He's an athletic guy. If you look at his combine stats and kind of his movement skills from, I like to look at Mock Draftable and their like spider graphs and stuff. His movement skills are really good, or were when he was coming in the league. Obviously 30 years old now, maybe not quite at that level anymore. But suffered a season-ending injury before his first game with the Texans. And then as he was battling back to play in his second season, was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and fought that for 3 years before finally working his way back to an NFL field into the Texans practice squad, and eventually played a couple games as like a jumbo tight end, kind of swing tackle for them at the end of a season. And then he followed Vrabel to Tennessee, where he's mostly been a practice squad guy. He's one of these guys. His teammates love him. He's great in the locker room. He knows what to do. He's a studious guy. Vrabel actually credits him with teaching his son, Tyler Vrabel, who's going to be probably an NFL draft pick, if not this year, then the next, a left tackle from Boston College. He credits David Quessenberry with teaching Tyler how to play left tackle. He's a guy that he took him aside and kind of made him a personal project to kind of work with him. So he's a guy that gives a lot. He's a great story. He's a better story than he's a player. To be clear, he's not some all-star that they've unearthed because of circumstances here. He's still susceptible. He's got balance issues. He's got technique issues, but he's a good enough athlete, and he'll play hard for them. And he hasn't been. There haven't been many games where you look at him and you go, man, that is just a crippling liability for this offense right now. They just cannot protect that backside. They've helped him quite a bit, but that's to be expected when you have a guy like that come into the game. So I think he's a liability. He's the weakest spot on the offense, but he hasn't been a huge problem for them to date.
Okay, that gives us a great idea of some of the changes. So let's go back and talk about the offense again. And Tannehill we'll start with because he's the natural point. He seems to be a guy I'm very afraid of in multiple ways. I mean, obviously his play action game is what he's just ruthless with in terms of having Henry and continually taking advantage of that. But Tannehill as a runner has been very scary recently, and against the Ravens and going back to last year's playoff game.
Yeah, Tannehill, he's obviously, the story on him. He was a wide receiver at Texas A&M his first few years, and actually, I mean, he was a pretty successful wide receiver. He had a 1,000-yard season in college, and then he turned to quarterback, which was what he played in high school and was recruited as, and was obviously did well enough there to be drafted 8th overall by the Dolphins. The physical skill set is great. He can run. 6'4", 210 pounds, good enough size. He's a little on the thin side for an NFL quarterback, but he's tough as nails. So I mean, he's not going to run anybody over really, but he will run hard and he's not afraid of contact by any means. But really, the thing that he brings to the table, he's got enough speed that when you get him out on these naked boots, when you get him into these read option runs, he can make you pay if you completely abandon him, right? He's not going to kill you, but he can make you pay if you leave him alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what that reminds me of is Joe Flacco, when he was in Baltimore, they ran twice a game, I'd say, zone block left, naked boot right, where they've got, a fake zone block play, run to the left, and they naked boot him to the right. With Flacco, that's much higher probability of being effective. It's probably true with Tannehill too, when you don't completely fear the guy as a runner. Lamar Jackson tries to do that. He has to then make a play on the one defender who will almost never be fooled. And when we do our offensive line scoring, we always say, 91 not fooled, or whatever the number of the backside edge defender, because it's almost always true now.
Well, it's something that we saw with Mariota when he was here, right? Mariota was a guy that people feared his legs, and part of that was that he was not as proficient with his arm as Tannehill is. So a lot of teams, and the Ravens, I specifically remember the game that was played in Nashville in, was it 2019 or 2018? 18, that's right.
11 sack game, right?
Yes, that's the one. So that play, there was multiple times where they tried to run that naked boot out the back, and Terrell Suggs was having none of it. He was coming for Mariota the entire way because they were looking for that. That's something that the Titans still run that play. They run it just as frequently now as they did with Mariota. But two things happened, right? Mariota's not the quarterback anymore. It's Tannehill. And then Henry's emergence. If you don't close down that backside against Henry and you let him put that foot in the ground and let you over pursue and get upfield, he is a big time problem at that point. So being able to pursue those zone runs from the backside is important against Henry. And the Titans take advantage of that, right? They're able to punish you when you start overcommitting. And that's a field thing. That's a play caller thing. That's something Arthur Smith has become very good at picking up on. All right, they're starting to really kind of close down this backside. We need to give them a naked and show them that we can come out the back door. And so that's something Tannehill will do. And then these read options. To give you an idea on what Tannehill's done with his legs lately, he has 5 rushing touchdowns in the last 3 games.
Wow.
Yeah. So he is and one of those was very long, but that's something that they do in the red zone. They do on the goal line. They'll put Tannehill in shotgun and give him a little read keeper with Henry, and so many people just take the dive with Henry, and then most of his touchdowns, he is literally walking in or skipping into the end zone, and there's nobody near him. It's a play that they get uncontested a lot of times, so it's something to watch for, especially when they get down close.
All right, so we talked a little bit about the Sambrailo exchange to Questenberry. I'm hearing a little bit of background noise there. We okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So want to take us through the offensive line from left to right, if you would, and just who's there right now for the Ravens to face this Sunday.
Yeah, so left or right, Questenberry, we already hit on him. He's probably the weakest point in the offensive line, or he is the weakest point in the offensive line. That's the matchup that I think will keep people up at night in Nashville is Ngakoue versus Questenberry.
Okay.
Then you've got the left guard, Saffold. It sounds like he's going to play, or at least he says he's going to play. Now, players all the time will say, I'm going to play, and then the trainers and coaching staff say, not so fast. Your ankle is nowhere near to play on. So we'll see if he actually gets out there. Today, we got news that Aaron Brewer, who is his backup at left guard, who played and started the game in Week 11 against the Ravens, he went on the COVID list today. So we will see whether or not he is going to be able to get off the list. It depends on if he was a close contact or if he was a positive test. If he was a close contact, when that close contact was, if it was Tuesday, he would have a shot. He did not practice yesterday, so I think that must have been related because he was on the injury report with a DNP, non-injury related. So there's a chance it was a Tuesday and he will be able to get cleared by game time, but we'll see.
We've had a little experience with this in Baltimore, but it works retroactively, I believe. So Monday, if he had the close contact, he certainly would have sat out on Tuesday. But if he practiced on Monday, they might have just figured it out on Tuesday. And did he have a facility closure, or is that just the Browns? Did the Titans continue to practice?
The Titans did not have a facility closure. So they had the trainer that tested positive. And then yesterday, Wednesday, Kevin Byard and Aaron Brewer were both DNP, not injury related. Now, Byard returned to practice today and has not gone on the COVID list, obviously. So he, I guess, is clear. And those may have been like contact tracing situations where they were looking at it. And that would lend itself to the idea that maybe he's just a close contact of the trainer. They're going to monitor him. And if he's still good by Sunday, he could get out there. So that'll be something that's interesting to watch, especially if Saffold can't go.
Brewer, kind of a fascinating guy, way undersized for an NFL guard at 270 pounds. And it's remarkable that he can function at the position going against really big bodies.
When they brought him into training camp, I went back and looked at his tape from Texas State, and obviously the tape looks really good. I mean, as you'd expect for any guy at that size to make it into an NFL training camp, you have to have some really good tape out there. And it was very impressive. Now, I was extremely skeptical that he would make the roster or even the practice squad. He ends up making the 53-man roster. They did not bother. He was the only undrafted free agent to make the 53-man roster out of the Titans camp, which was a shocker to me. I just thought there was no way. So he's on the 53-man roster. And then when Saffold first goes down earlier in the season, they bring him in instead of Jamil Douglas, who had been the guy that was really their swing interior lineman. He plays center, he'll play guard, wherever they need to plug him in, they plug Douglas typically. And Douglas is not a very good player. So it's not like they're finding, it's not like they're putting Brewer in over somebody who's really a great backup. But Brewer getting the nod for that Ravens game was pretty surprising around here. And Brewer played really well in that game, especially considering what he is as a rookie, as an undrafted guy, as a guy that's 6'1", 270 pounds. So extremely rare body type, really athletic, plays with great leverage as you'd expect, and really is a high effort player too. So I think he's going to struggle a lot with Brandon Williams, who's going to have almost 100 pounds on him. Calais Campbell, who's got 7 inches of height and who knows how much length on him. I think he's going to struggle with this matchup a lot more this time around than he did last time if he is forced to play. But the Titans obviously are hopeful they get Saffold back, who has been dealing with his ankle for several weeks now, has been playing well when he gets on the field, but he's had to come out of multiple games. It's something that's been a struggle for him to get through a full game out there. So we'll see what happens at that left guard spot. But that's one spot to watch.
Ben Jones been playing all year at center, playing pretty well.
Yeah, Ben Jones is playing really well. I think he's PFF's fourth highest graded center if you by PFF's grades. By the eye test and by studying the tape, I can tell you Ben Jones is in that class of the best centers in the NFL right now. He plays extremely well. He's not particularly big, not particularly strong, not particularly athletic. He's athletic enough to make those kind of zone blocks, climbing to the second level, that kind of thing. He's really effective at kind of making these cut blocks on linebackers at the second level and getting down and just chopping them down to the ground. That's something he does really well. He's just an extremely smart, extremely effective center. So he's playing really well in there. And then right guard is the guy, Nate Davis, second year out of Charlotte, third round pick for the Titans last year, was absolutely terrible when he got pushed into action as a rookie early on. Got better as the season went on. By the time the Titans hit the playoffs and Henry was really cooking, Nate Davis was playing really good football, and that has carried over this year. He's playing even better. He's a prototypical guard build, thick legs, just a block of a man at 6'3", 315, and moves really well, carries that size well. So he's a powerful lower body guy, going to move some bodies in the middle of that defense, and he's the guy that I think has really kicked it on for the Titans this year. It really, Jeffrey Simmons, AJ Brown, the Titans rookie class from 2019 is tremendous. But Nate Davis really is probably the most improved out of that entire group. And he's turned into a guy that I think will probably be a Pro Bowl guard within the next 2 to 3 years. I think he had an argument this year based on the way he played. Right tackle next to him, Dennis Kelly, long guy, kind of a career backup. He's been the Titans swing tackle for the past 4 years before this season. When they let Jack Conklin walk to Cleveland and brought Kelly back. Now, Kelly had replaced Conklin several times in his role as a swing tackle, and including at the end of 2018 when Derrick Henry started to break out. Kelly was actually the guy that was playing right tackle at that point for the Titans, and he was playing really good football for them down the stretch. So I think the Titans came to that crossroads with Conklin this past offseason, and they decided we're gonna bring back Kelly for $7 million a year and let Conklin walk at his whatever he got, 14, 15 million a year. So they ended up getting a guy that's given them probably 95% of what Conklin did, but at half the price or less. So I think that's been a good move for them from a asset management standpoint. But Kelly's not as good as Conklin is by any stretch of the imagination, but he is long and he does an effective job at right tackle.
So Ravens fans know it by the old Ozzie Newsome saying 80% of the player at 20% of the price, something he really lived by in terms of allowing a lot of free agents to walk. Kelly, really interesting player at age 30, had never played a full season before. He'd played stretches of 3 or 4 games at times, probably always coming in as an injury replacement. But you have to go back to his rookie year that he had any significant playing time, or more than 5 games in a year, I'll say. And this year now, all of a sudden, he's played them all.
Yeah, he's a funny guy that when John Robinson got to Nashville in 2016, one of the very first things he did was traded away their 2015 second round pick, Dorial Green-Beckham, who the Titans had traded up to get. I think he was the number 40 pick in that draft. He was this big wide receiver, obviously looked like a guy that had all the tools. I think he's like 6'5", 220, could run like a deer, all everything you want, but didn't have it upstairs. He just was a guy. He was a problem off the field. He wasn't very bright. He couldn't get lined up in training camp correctly at times. So they traded Dorial Green-Beckham. But at that point, he had done some things that rookie year where he had played enough and had shown some flashes, and the fan base was still kind of like, okay, we're going to figure out how to develop this guy into a real player. They traded him almost immediately for Dennis Kelly, who is this backup offensive lineman from the Eagles who had never really started before. And everybody, Titans fans went crazy. They were ready to run John Robinson out of town immediately. Well, the funny thing is, Dennis Kelly has as many touchdown catches as Dorial Green-Beckham since that trade. He actually caught a couple touchdowns for them last year in his role as the swing tackle. He caught one against the Chiefs in the playoffs. He caught another one during the regular season, and he's turned into a good right tackle. So they obviously won that trade by quite a bit.
I want Ravens fans to remember how much all of you guys, or a lot of you guys out there, wanted DGB going into that 2015 draft. The Ravens ended up getting Perriman, who was not good by any stretch, but is still now in the league and a better receiver, obviously, than Dorial Greenback, who might be working for Amazon now. I have no idea.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. The last I'd heard, and not to pile on DGB at all, but the last I'd heard of him, he was getting arrested for something. So it's not been good for him. Obviously, he had his issues coming out, and those have not gone away from what I understand. But that's one of those things. You see a trade like that, and people go nuts, and then 5 years later, the Titans have a starting right tackle who they can rely on game in and game out, and Green Beckham is nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, that's a move you're not unhappy with, I'm sure. The fact. Okay, great explanation of the offensive line. We got through Tannehill. We talked a little bit about Henry already. Take us through kind of some of the receiving cores or other key injuries on offense I also want to get to. And I apologize if you're hearing some pacing need in my voice here, but maybe we should try and go a little faster. And I apologize. Some of that's my fault.
No problem. So obviously from a receiving standpoint, Titans start with AJ Brown. That's their go-to guy. He put up another 1,000-yard season, despite missing a couple games early in the year with a knee bone bruise, and then he's been dealing with an ankle issue for really the past 5 or 6 weeks. He's been playing through it effectively. Obviously, he had 11 catches, 150 yards, and a touchdown last week, and really saved them on that final drive with that bomb from Tannehill. Mm-hmm. But he is, every bit a superstar receiver. His elite ability is probably after the catch. He is a bear to tackle. He's a 226-pound receiver, so he is a lot to bring down. And obviously that showed up in the first matchup with the Ravens when he broke the tackle and then carried 3 guys into the end zone for that touchdown that put the Titans up late. That is his biggest power, but he's also become a really, really nice route runner. He's got great hands. He attacks the ball in the air. He does it all for the Titans, and he's really turned into a very, very good NFL receiver. Corey Davis is a guy that's the lights come on for him this year a little bit. He's should have probably had a 1,000-yard receiving season. He had a bad game against the Texans with a bunch of drops, which has been uncharacteristic for him this year, but he's another guy, good size, good speed, good after the catch. He's a tough matchup. Those 2 guys are really the focal point right now in the Titans receiving core, though. Khalif Raymond is not very involved. Cam Batson is currently filling in for Adam Humphries in the slot. Humphries is out with a concussion. I don't expect him to be back this week. So it's probably going to be Batson, who's a speedy guy. He does some things for you. He had a few nice plays against the Ravens the last time they played. But he's not a big threat. The passing offense is going to flow through Brown and Davis. And Jonnu Smith is probably your third tier, really pass catcher in that group. He's another size, speed, and athleticism after the catch guy. So you can kind of see the mold that the Titans built this offense with. It is a very difficult to tackle offense. You need to bring your physicality to this game because they are going to be difficult to bring down. They are not going down on an arm tackle.
The annoying guy from the Titans this year, I don't remember if he was playing in the playoff game or not, but Anthony Ferkser has been a guy who's given the Ravens some trouble. Talk a little bit about him and how he fits in the offense this year.
Yeah, he's kind of a third down pest. He's the guy that's going to get free on 3rd and 8 and be, just past the sticks and make the catch and convert and kind of extend drives. That's really his role. He's a good route runner, very smart guy, very good feel for zone coverage and very good feel for beating man coverage. He has a basketball background and he compares route running to being a point guard and kind of the moves that he would need to make to free himself up in the lane. So he's got an interesting, he's a Harvard guy. He was a fullback actually at one point for the Jets before the Titans moved him back to tight end. He played wide receiver for Harvard at one point. So he's not a blocker by any means. He's not a very physical guy, but he's a really nifty route runner, great hands, great great contested catch ability. So he is a pain in the butt on third downs, no doubt about that.
All right. The Ravens will face a lot of 12, some 13 from the Titans. I think you mentioned they run about 40% 11.
Yeah, it's about 40% 11. And the rest is mostly 12. They'll do some 13. They'll do some 21. They've got a fullback, Corey Blasingame, that they like. So they're going to give you some different looks personnel-wise, but it is mostly heavy packages. They don't, and especially lately, with Humphreys not being in the picture, Batson is not better than Ferkser or not better than Blasingame and some of these other options that they have. They're more effective when they have other players on the field besides their slot receiver. So you'll really probably only see 11 on third down. That's really the only time they're going to bring that out.
Okay, so one of the questions for the Ravens is whether or not they activate 5 cornerbacks for this game, or whether they activate a third safety so they can play some dime defense. But I think on the early downs versus 12 or 21, we probably see lots of base package. There's really not a lot of need probably to play big nickel the way you might versus some in between teams that have 12 with a real split tight end. Am I gathering that correctly? They don't have a Travis Kelce or a Mark Andrews, who's going to be a really big receiving threat from tight end, right?
Yeah, I mean, Jonnu Smith is the closest thing to that, and he's a very good athlete. Now, he's not the route runner that a Travis Kelce is. That's the thing that kind of holds him back. He is straight line speed, excellent. He's a powerful guy, but he is not as quick and shifty as some of those guys. So I would say, honestly, I think he matches up. He probably plays better when you do put a corner on him because he's able to use that physicality and he's tough to tackle after the catch. So I think you're better off putting a bigger player on Jonnu Smith. He's not necessarily going to run away from you, though he is athletic, but he's not a burner by any means.
All right. Well, let's move over to the defense. And I always like to start with, how do the Titans like to line up defensively versus teams that are playing 12-21? And then on third downs, obvious passing situations, what do they shift to?
Yeah, so the Titans, their typical base for 12-21 early down work is going to be a 3-4 most of the time. Now, lately that has shifted mostly due to personnel concerns into kind of a hybrid 4-3 under / 3-4 with an elephant in kind of situation. So they're playing Jack Crawford almost as an end with generally Jeffrey Simmons, Daquan Jones, and then maybe either maybe Tier Tart if he is able to come off the COVID list, which he's a guy that I think is a very interesting player. If he's able to play, he's a difference maker for them. But we'll see whether he gets off the list or not. He went on Sunday, so it's a close contact or a positive test question for him. Yeah, they're going to play mostly 3-4 base on early down 12 personnel. Now, with the caveat that against the Ravens, they tend to play a little bit differently. They don't play as much. In the past 2 matchups, they don't play as much base defense against the Ravens. They are going to play a little bit more nickel, a little bit more of their big dime sets, even against some heavier personnel. I went back and watched the last game and kind of studied that today, and they, as the game went on, they matched personnel less and less. They started to just leave nickel, leave big dime out on the field for bigger stretches, despite the Ravens bringing in whether it be a fullback or multiple tight ends. So that's something that I think we'll probably see.
Okay, so two terminology elements you use there. I always love to do these because everybody uses their own. But big dime is a 3-3, 3 safety, 3 corner dime as opposed to a 4 corner dime. Okay,
right.
And elephant end means instead of an outside linebacker on one end of a 3-4, you're leaving one at your 5 tech perhaps as the outside guy, dropping an outside linebacker off the line of scrimmage where you normally wouldn't have him, possibly to cover. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And Harold Landry is the guy that they actually drop off the line of scrimmage, which is kind of counterintuitive because he's their best pass rusher, but he is very much athletic enough to do it, and he really does it very well. It's funny. Landry he hasn't turned into the pass rusher the Titans hoped he would be, but he's a very good all-around football player. and he does a nice job in the run game. And the Titans actually ran a good bit of like a 3-3 stack look in that initial matchup during the regular season with 3 down linemen, and then Landry backed up with Evans. And at the time, I think it was mostly Compton, but now it'll obviously be Long, just stacked up behind the defensive line and just kind of trying to pack the middle and spill everything outside. So I'll be interested to see if we see more of that look. I would guess that we will.
Huh. Okay, well that'd be something different. And one of the things we've kind of talked about is that the Ravens, obviously the Titans figured out how to beat the game out of the pistol where Lamar was generally going to be a threat to the outside in last year's playoff game. And one of the points that I've kind of made is that I think the Titans need to refigure it out on defense this year, because the Ravens are really running most of their offense out of sidecar or king queen, some people call it, where they'll try and have the running back be the outside threat, Lamar the threat up the middle, but they also can bring in a third threat from a jet motion guy. And they've even been doing some of that with Pony, but some of it also with Devin Duvernay, the wide receiver, in jet motion as well. So it's interesting to hear how they might, attempt to defend that.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see that as well. I think the Titans seem to be of the opinion, and I know this is a strategy that other teams have used as well, but they seem to be of the opinion that against the Ravens, they need to get as much speed on the field as possible to be able to confront what Lamar in that kind of spread option, offense really brings to the table. Because you get Lamar in space against some of these defensive end types, and there's just no contest. The guy doesn't have a hope of making a play. So what's he doing out there? So they definitely went smaller in the earlier matchups. One guy to kind of keep an eye on, Derek Roberson has been out the last few weeks. Derek Roberson played a lot against the Ravens the last time they played. He's the other outside linebacker opposite Landry. I think he'll probably be back this week, and I think it's probably pretty important that he is, because the other guys that they've been playing in his place, Wyatt Ray, Brooks Reed, some guys like that, I think they might have Nate Orchard come up for this game. He's one of their protected players on the practice squad this week. So they're looking at options there. That's been a weak spot for them. But Roberson is by far the most athletic of that group. And he, from a defending Lamar Jackson standpoint, I think you absolutely have to have athletic edges, because if you have a guy that he can isolate in space and just run around, you're going to get killed on that side. So I think Landry and Roberson both being on the field helps them have a little bit better hope of defending some of those option read plays that the Ravens like to bust out.
All right. It's terrific stuff here. Let's talk about the back end a little bit and make sure we've covered each of the players back there. Obviously, some of the Titans' terrific talent back there with Kevin Byard is a name we don't want to see. We don't want to hear it all on Sunday.
Yeah, Byard is, he's having a down year relative to his previous seasons, and not just from an interception standpoint. He only has 1 interception this season, but he's been, he just looks a little bit out of sorts. And it's been a question around Nashville all year, kind of what's going on with Kevin Byard. He's played better lately, I feel like, but I think he's a guy that really misses Dean Pease. He always talked a lot about Dean Pease's tip sheets and kind of the information that he would give him to study during the week, and that helped him make a lot of plays, and that helped him see a lot of stuff. The Titans don't have a defensive coordinator right now. They chose to promote basically Shane Bowen, their outside linebackers coach, to defensive play caller. He's not got the DC title. Vrabel's more involved this year than he has been in years past, but it's not gone well. The Titans defense is among the worst in the league. And I think that is reflected in Byard's play. I don't think his superpower, he's not a size speed guy. He is a extremely intelligent football player. He plays hard. He understands technique, that kind of thing. But he is mostly gets by on instincts and intelligence and film study and knowing where he's going before the offense does. So he's, I think, been a step slow this year, and I think it's related to the change in defensive voice in the room. And I don't think he's as comfortable this year without Dean Pease as he has been in years past.
Sorry about me. It was all my fault. Didn't had myself on mute. Appreciate that, Mike. The thing about Byard that's bothered me in the past is how Reed-like he is on the back end. That he is very much doesn't just think about how do I need to cover this receiver? How do I need to disrupt this pass? It's more like what am I going to do when this pass is overthrown? And really being in the right spot to make a play on the football. And we saw that with the interception that was tipped by Andrews last year in the playoff game. That was the beginning of the end in that game. In terms of the Ravens never really being caught up at any point after that. And it was a big turning point. It's not the first time Kevin Byard's intercepted the Ravens by any stretch. I'd have to go back and look and see how many times, but I bet it's been 3, 4, 5 times in his career already.
Yeah, I think he had either 2 or 3 picks against Flacco in one of the games in Nashville. And I think he actually picked off Flacco in the game that they played, the blowout with the 11 sack game. So, yeah, he's kind of, and frankly, he's haunted Flacco. Even in Denver, he picked off Flacco. But he's a really good player. I still think he's a good player. He's just had not quite as good a season. Now, what they've done against the Ravens, especially on third downs, typically is they will match up Byard on Andrews, and Byard likes to be very physical in his man coverage. When they do go to man, they like to get Byard down there on Andrews because I think they trust him more than anybody to be able to slow him down. But that's a matchup that I think will be very interesting to watch, and especially with the Titans are very comfortable with their third safety, Monty Hooker, who played a lot in the regular season matchup because Kenny Vaccaro was out for that game. So that was a lot of Hooker and Byard together. Hooker is not the physical player that Vaccaro is, but he is a very good coverage player, very instinctive. He's kind of like Byard in that way, and he actually is tied for the team lead in interceptions this year with 4. Despite the fact that he only plays about 30 to 40% of the team's total snaps in the game. So he is very opportunistic defensively. So he's a guy that I think is going to play a lot in this game because, like I said, they're going to want to get a lot of speed on the field. They trust him. They trust, Byard and Vaccaro, obviously. I think you're going to see a lot of the 3 safety looks from the Titans in this matchup with Vaccaro really functioning almost as a linebacker in this defense. So I'm interested to see kind of how they approach using all 3 of those safeties this time, because last time they only had 2 at their disposal.
The Ravens certainly will need to make them pay for that if they do. And I just looked up Byard 4 career interceptions against the Ravens in, I think it's 4 games. So very impressive, obviously. That's some great stuff. Now you talked a little bit about the safeties. Let's move out to corner, and Adoree Jackson and Malcolm Butler now starting this game is better than where the Titans were last time around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Butler's had a great season. Honestly, he's the guy that's tied with Hooker for the team lead with 4 interceptions. He's really, Butler can be beat, especially in zone coverage when they put him into, particularly when he's in cover 3 or when he's in quarters. He really has a hard time losing guys and losing route combinations. So I think when they do drop in zone, attacking Butler is, to me, a good idea. Now, he also he's kind of a wild card, right? Part of the reason he gets beat a lot in zone is because he likes to cheat. And he likes to read the eyes of the quarterback and try to jump passes. So that's part of the reason he has interceptions. That's part of the reason he gets beat a lot. Now, when he is in press man, I think he's very, very good. He's physical. He's kind of got that junkyard dog mentality that he wants to be in your face at all times, and that's how he plays.
What you just described from Butler, very similar to Marcus Peters in terms of a guy who really looks to jump routes, does not have all the speed that maybe other cornerbacks do, but very opportunistic. The thing about Peters that's so impressive to me is what a good gambler he is. Is that true of Butler as well?
I don't think he's as good as Peters. I think Butler gets beat at a higher rate than Peters and probably doesn't get rewarded with the picks at the rate that Peters does either. But they are very similar in that mindset. They are looking to make plays. And Butler is the one other thing that stands out about the Titans corners is they're both very physical tacklers. They're very good coming up against the shorter throws and getting guys on the ground, not allowing big run after the catch opportunities. And they're good in run support as well, Butler and Adoree Jackson as well. And Jackson is an interesting guy to watch. Obviously, tremendous athlete. but he's been dealing with this knee injury we kind of talked about earlier all season. I don't think he's 100%. He's still being held out of practices, and they're really trying to get him to game day. At this point, it's not and he's barely practiced this season. It's a lot to put on him after barely playing, barely practicing all year. He's going to have to go out there and hold down one side of the field for them in a playoff game. But he's a really good athlete. When he's on his game, he's among the best corners in the NFL, in my opinion. We saw him against the Ravens last year. He had 3 tremendous pass breakups in that matchup. So I think when he's on his game, he can be very, very effective. It's just how close to 100% will he be on Sunday? And it is really impossible for us to know.
Now, this is a little bit off topic, but I remember Adoree Jackson getting a carry against the Ravens on maybe the first play of the game, second play of the game kind of thing. Yeah. Did that ever come back? Did he ever go back to play any more running back?
No, that was something that kind of died with Mike Mularkey. That was something that he was doing quite a bit with. And Adoree Jackson was their kick returner and punt returner at that point as well. That's something that Vrabel has moved him away from. I think he wants him to focus on playing cornerback and being the best corner that he can be and not complicating his life with offense and special teams responsibilities. So that's something that they've moved away from entirely.
All right. It's a terrific layout you've given us for the entire Titans team here. Is there a player you think that really matches up well against who the Ravens have to offer on the other side that can give the Ravens fits in this game?
I think one guy that I'm interested in watching is going to be Jeffrey Simmons versus the interior of that Ravens offensive line. I think the Ravens offensive line has played much better, obviously, in recent weeks, but during that first matchup, I felt like Simmons and also Tier Tart to some degree were able to kind of get some big time penetration. They were able to get disruption in the Ravens backfield by beating that center and guard combination in there. So I think Simmons is the Titans' most talented defender. Now he's been dealing with a knee injury. He hasn't always been 100% this season. I think that saps some of his ability. But if you go back and watch some of the early stuff from this season, the Vikings game, that time frame early in the season when he was 100% healthy, he can be a game changer on the inside of the defensive line. So I think him against that Ravens interior is one of the biggest matchups of the game. And I think the Titans absolutely have to win that matchup if they're going to win this.
Okay, that's great stuff. Let's tell people again where they find your stuff.
Yeah, so BroadwaySportsMedia.com is the website, and then on Twitter you can follow me at Mike Miracles.
Okay, you'd be a fool not to, folks. Make sure you give him a follow, at least until this game is done. You want to make sure you get good Titans information right up until game time. Visit FilmstudyBaltimore.com, if you will. We got all the normal stuff out there this week. The offensive and defensive articles, the offense and defense podcasts are out. By the numbers be coming out tomorrow. And we've got great stuff up in the gallery. Take a look at that because there's some great new stuff, the offensive line scoring, and in addition, a number of charts about Lamar Jackson and about ample time and space in the pocket. So interesting stuff there. I hope you give that a visit. And Mike, thanks again for joining us. This is just terrific stuff.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
All right. We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.